I enjoy fighting games. Specifically, I enjoy Ramlethal Valentine, and every other given moment in any fighting game is just slightly worse than when I'm not playing Ramlethal Valentine. But when I'm enjoying games that may or may not include said Ramlethal, my go-to console is usually the PS5 or sometimes PC, and for good reason. Because I need more than 4 buttons and almost an analog stick. Okay, still, I'd be lying if I said the DS wasn't one of the consoles of all time. I mean, look at the features. It's got the MP3 player. It can run advanced dog simulations. It can even drive your 2012 Toyota Corolla. But most important of all, it can teach you how to cook. So with a feature as impressive as that, it's only natural that fighting games are next up on the... And I burnt it. All right, well played, Miyamoto. Starting off strong, we've got the Nintendo DS's very own Guilty Gear DS. Otherwise known as Guilty Gear, I can't believe it doesn't stand for Nintendo DS Dust Strikers. I mean, the only problem I see with this idea is that a certain character didn't exist when the game was made, so I guess for now, we'll just have to settle for the classic characters like Cowboy Bebop, Godzilla Skinwalker, and Orange. Even though it's a smaller roster for a fighting game than I normally expect, Guilty Gear Dust Strikers has a pretty unique take on the whole formula, where instead of the usual 1v1 standard fighting style, battles take place in a 4-player free-for-all battle royale format. It's like Super Smash Bros, just without the Smash Bros. Each of the characters in this game are slightly stripped down versions of their mainline counterparts. The complexity in the attacks is also pretty reduced from what you'd be used to in a typical fighter, with just 2 attack buttons this time. In some cases, punch and hard punch. I really wish the controls just felt better though. It really feels like they took the original movement and just translated it 1-to-1, which makes it feel more clunky than not when it comes to changing directions or moving around midair. I don't know, it's like you're taking physics meant for a stick and putting them on a tiny DDR pad. I always really hated how unresponsive fighting games can feel sometimes, and in a game where you're platforming on top of that, it just gets weird. Really though, most of the matches played in the same way casual Smash would. Find the guy with the most stocks, break his kneecaps, and don't be the guy with the least stocks. All while throwing items into the mix, and you have an admittedly fun and sort of fleshed out platformer fighter. At least, as far as you can get with the DS. This game was honestly really unique though, for actually using both screens to give you a wider view of the action. There's even an item that flips the fighters on each screen and just throws the match into complete chaos, just because. With that being said, can you guess what they decided to do with the final boss? If you guessed, throw all of the good parts away and make it suck literally 20 times harder, you'd be right. Because seriously, what is this? There's nothing but projectiles, an attack that's so big it's actually just unavoidable. Oh yeah, and deals half your health. And to top it all off, this guy just takes no damage. I ended up looking up for a guide on how to beat, Giguk? And it turns out the most effective way is to just sit at the bottom of the arena, do literally nothing but block, and then hit the body on his stinger when he comes down. Hooray for gameplay. And with that, he goes down easily enough and the world is saved. That's it guys, Guilty Gear is finally over. But that's not even getting to the best menu option in the game yet. Have you ever wanted to win with no skill or effort? Are you tired of playing Guilty Gear with both hands? Do you like drinking motor oil?
Me?
Well here, Robokai. After customizing his moveset with a few options we have, he just wins. Like, it's not even close. You just throw down some Kool-Aid or whatever this is and use any attacks you want, and it just blows up everything for some reason. Especially with the help of his greatest custom move in the game being available right off the bat. His giant invincible robot horse. You can just spam this as many times as you want, eventually break any enemy's guard, and there's just nothing they can do about it. Hands down, the best way to experience the game if you're too busy to learn how to actually play. Alright, but you want to talk about literally squishing a fighting game down to DS size? Because that's exactly what they did to all the characters of BlazBlue. What I meant to say was BlazBlue Super Melee Battle Brawlers Battle Royale Battle Deluxe and Knuckles Fortnite. I have an interesting backstory with this game. To set the stage for you, it's sometime around 2011 and Small Slash is just chillin', browsing the Nintendo eShop. For some reason in my house growing up, my parents viewed online shopping as the scourge of the earth. First, you put your credit card on the website. Then they take your house, your wife, your kids. No, they got the dog! He was so young. So, point being, whenever I was bored waiting for eShop cards like normal, I would always just do the next best thing. Endlessly watch trailers on the eShop because I didn't have a smartphone. Woohoo! And it was right there that BlazBlue caught my eyes. Not because as an elementary schooler, I was already a based 6'2" fighting game Chad, getting ready to annihilate my friends in the next locals using Strive Ramlethal. That was middle school. But because it actually looked a lot like a little fighting game I already played at the time called Get Am 2. Okay, calling it a fighting game is a bit of a stretch. That game was 100% one of the first gacha-esque, definitely pay-to-win coded quote-unquote free games I'd ever played. But I mean, it still had its fair share of depth, different weapons and classes, tons of characters, and to top it all off, you could download the sex skin right on the GetAmp forums. Whatever that means. So anyways, seeing the resemblance but on the DS of all consoles blew my mind. For some reason, I saw BlazBlue and decided this would be everything I loved about the original, but now in the palm of my hands. Oh, hell no. This is a DSiWare game for $5. And well, to be honest, it's not bad actually. Don't get me wrong, by no means is this a fighting game at all, but what's here is surprisingly pretty good for the price. From the few, and by that I mean 5 characters there are to choose from, each of them actually have their own unique special attacks and combos. Sure, heavily simplified, but it's got some charm to it. It's awesome to see that even in microorganism form, these characters can still keep their identities, despite there being just 4 buttons to work with. The main single-player mode takes you through all the mini-games that it has to offer, things like capture the flag, points, deathmatch, you get it. Nothing here is going to take longer than like 2 minutes to finish, but for $5, or as a homebrew enjoyer, $3.99, even though it's not much compared to the originals, I still think BlazBlue is just dumb fun to kill some time with. And with download play capability, as long as you can find another 3 breathing human beings with a DS, which is way easier said than done, this could actually make for like a fun 15 minutes. Almost? With a small development team listed in the credits though, you can tell this is probably a smaller project done in the developer's spare time. Like, yeah, it's nothing special, but I just can't be mad at it. It's cute enough anyways.
Is that a short joke?
Die!
But of course, it doesn't end there with the DS. With the Nintendo DS serving as the de facto dumping ground for anything in the portable market at the time, you can bet developers were struck with anime fighter cash grab syndrome. And it'll be terminal if I have anything to say about it. Alright, I'm exaggerating. These aren't bad games by any means, but they're just kinda there. Every console generation gets these, usually very surface-level fighters based on a licensed shonen anime series, but with the limitations of the DS in particular, they had to at least get creative if they wanted to try that here. Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors 2. The UI's got a very Smash Bros. Melee feel to it, and that's kind of the best I can say about it. There's a lot of content here in terms of character and story cutscenes, and the graphics and music are pretty great for a DS title, but the battles just feel meh? You fly around an arena of choice with the option to swap between characters as you please. The team that gets knocked out first loses, and Goku. Don't get me wrong, there's some combos and attacks unique to each character, and I think that battles taking place in a pseudo 3D environment is a pretty cool idea to try out on the base DS. But when most of the battles end up playing out like this, none of that really matters. I haven't played the multiplayer though, so maybe that's where it really gets to shine, but I'll never know. Naruto Shinobi Rumble. This exists? Look, I'm gonna be honest, I was already never really that into Naruto, and this just feels like a Flash game they stuck on the DS. I'm sure there are some people out there who really like this, but compared to the other like 10 Naruto games the console got, I just couldn't really find a reason for this one to be made. And it's not even like anything against this one in particular, but it just goes to show how much licensed slop there is in the pile of DS fighting games out there. But luckily, buried underneath the thousands of Sasuke and Frieza corpses, a little-known game called Jump Ultimate Stars might actually be built kind of different. Jump Ultimate Stars follows a similar formula to Smash Bros. As well as Guilty Gear Dust Strikers. In addition to fighting and trying to take out the other players as you typically would in a fighting game, you'll also be platforming and trying to avoid falling off the stage. Yet again, but hands down the coolest part here is the customization you get in the abilities and party system. Being a weekly Shonen Jump fighting game, it only makes sense to incorporate weekly Shonen Jump somehow. So with the bottom of the screen, you actually get to create your own manga pages out of individual panels from each of the series in the game. Every panel gives either an active ability, a bonus effect, or another character you can switch to mid-battle depending on each of their sizes and locations. I just love the fact that like actual art from each of the series is used in their respective story modes. Like I'm just watching the opening of the Hunter x Hunter campaign and all of a sudden, hey, I have that one. Look at him, he's right here. It's so lifelike. Okay, but this game is really fleshed out. Every one of the characters feels totally unique from one another, with their movesets coming directly from their most iconic moments in each of the featured series. You can also swap out characters in the middle of combos, adding yet another layer of depth to the whole system. Not to mention the metagame of luring your opponent to the edge of the page, breaking through the side of the panel because of course you can do that, and throwing them straight into the pits of hell. The game's feel is interesting though. Attacks definitely have weight to them, but the movement doesn't feel that great yet again. But I mean, it's definitely playable, and let's be honest, you're not really playing this game for competitive viability. Nah, I'm locked the in lapping Luffy 2024 Evo, baby, let's go. The ideas they had for this game were seriously impressive though, especially on the DS. Like, I couldn't think of any better way to pull off a manga crossover fighting game. Every aspect of this is just so unapologetically jumped. Kinda makes you wonder why it ended up stuck in the DS, let alone only in Japan. Wait a second, what's that? There's another jump fighting game for modern consoles? Well, why didn't you say so? Oh yeah, that's the one we don't talk about, my bad. But in all seriousness, I can kind of see why this never made its way to international shelves. The game came out in November 2006, well before anime and especially manga got the massive global foothold they have today. Nobody in the States were gonna know who any of these guys were, let alone the series where they came from. I mean, sure, Naruto, One Piece, maybe Hunter x Hunter and JoJo, but that only covers like a third of the game's roster. No, unless you're reading Jump, the magazine, straight from Japan, you are not even going to have encountered some of these guys. That's not to say this is any less of a game because of the niche it found itself in. This is one of the best quote-unquote fighting games I've ever played for the DS, and with such a unique concept, especially now that a lot of these series have become more widely known, there's never been a better time to just give it a shot. Speaking of giving things a shot, I wouldn't be doing the DS library any justice by leaving out some of the genuinely good and just genuinely the weirdest titles I could find. That kind of made me question whether or not we've reached the peak of video games in 2006. I mean, it's not really what I was thinking, but sure. Custom Robo Arena. This one definitely surprised me. I've had vastly different experiences with the Custom Robo series from the Japanese exclusive N64 version up till now, but this one feels the most like the original to me. Custom Robo at first glance appears to be more like an RPG where the battles take place using an interesting arena system instead of the normal turn-based stuff you're used to. And if you thought that, you'd be right. Except it is a stretch to call this game an RPG. If you've seen Bakugan, watched any Beyblade series, hell, if you've played Pokemon X or Y, you've pretty much already seen these characters hundreds of times before. I don't think they even tried to pretend they cared about any of the writing or the premise, but luckily the meat of the gameplay, the battles, is where Custom Robo Arena really gets to shine. The game's battles take place in a little one-on-one small arena with obstacles, where you pit your own custom robo against the enemy. Honestly, just moving around in this one feels great, where to me, as someone who doesn't really play many fighting games, I noticed that across all of the ones I've tried out for this video, movement usually felt kind of unresponsive and clunky like I mentioned before. There's probably a good reason for it, but the movement here is really responsive. It's super easy to fly across the arena, dodge enemy attacks, and weave through obstacles. It's genuinely a blast. Maybe you can consider this one a fighting game just for its one-on-one setting, wide variety of combat options, and general gameplay depth. Maybe not if you were expecting punches and kicks instead of gun. But definitions aside, this is a really unique approach to what feels very fighting game inspired to me, and that I wish we could see more of in the future, preferably without 10 minutes of the most cardboard, unskippable anime cutscenes in between, but I'll take what I can get. If you want to get even closer to any non-DS fighting game though, then look no further than Windy X Windam, or Windy Windam, Windy X Windam. And well, it's kind of weird though. Visually speaking, this game's aesthetic rocks. It should be expected when you took the developer of Izuna, Legend of the Unemployed Ninja, a game that had tons of charm already with all of the goofy DNA of the Mystery Dungeon series, and put them in charge of working on a completely different genre with no prior experience whatsoever, a new and unique fighting game IP, and on top of that, for a console it really just shouldn't be on, because why not? This is another game that uses both of the top and bottom screens really well, and it makes all of the backgrounds pop out that much more. There's tons of detail in each of the locations, and getting to see the rest of the horizon in the wider areas makes it feel pretty immersive. Well, as immersive as you can get with 240p anyways. All of the characters have really stylized designs. They all feel genuinely inspired. I'm avoiding talking about the gameplay as much as I can if you can tell, because I really don't want to have to do this. But I'm sorry, Windy Windam. This This is such a poorly designed fighting game, despite being the closest thing to a traditional approach I've played on this entire console. Characters do have a variety of different inputs, and there's tons of different attacks, combos, specials, and absolutely none of that matters. For certain characters, smashing single attack works just as well as trying to put in any effort, because all the hitboxes here are just so completely busted. It feels like you can hit anyone from across the screen. You can be hit no matter how well you space against the enemies. Sometimes attacks push you far back, sometimes they don't. You just press buttons and God decides the rest. And despite all of that, I actually really enjoyed this game somehow. You heard me. For having the competitive integrity of a literal slot machine, for having mechanics that feel like they were programmed using Scratch and held together with duct tape, this game has potential. I'm serious. The one thing I left out from before is a single mechanic which completely carries the entire rest of the experience and turns it from a would-be poorly designed fighting game to a poorly designed fighting game with killer movement. Every character in the game can, whenever they want to, just dash in any direction, jump insanely high, hover midair, and use aerial attacks. And man, it's just so satisfying to move around alone. The best comparison I can make is to Mega Man X or Zero. The dash sends you flying in a direction after jumping, and the momentum carries super well. It feels like the characters have legit weight to them, which makes it all the more satisfying to fling yourself across the screen at Mach speed. You can even dash into the ground immediately after jumping, which means yes, this game also has wave dashing. Now, like I said, I don't think the movesets for any of these characters were thought out that well or implemented in a way that's fair or engaging at all. But the general feel the game has is pretty good in comparison to what you typically expect from the traditional 2D fighter. I haven't gotten the chance to play this in multiplayer, but I can only imagine with both players using their dashes in between every attack, matches could turn into absolute chaos, which I would 100% pay to see. I think this formula has potential. I feel like fighting games today are so focused on being esports or competitively balanced that fun or inventive mechanics are just put on the back burner for the sake of appealing to an audience that really doesn't care for them in the first place. And that's perfectly okay. Fighting games are well designed, thought out, and have deep complexity and high skill ladders. This game has Izuna. It's Izuna. But as someone for who fighting games has never really had much of an appeal from a gameplay standpoint, save for the characters and overall spectacle, and heck, even just as a spectator sport, I can appreciate that Windy Windham, from a developer with no prior experience making fighting games, and making one for a console they really have no business being on, was able to inject a genuinely fun mechanic and gameplay flow for more casual players. It's always been a gripe of mine that multiplayer games are either too focused on being entirely competitive or entirely casual, with tons of market research poured into making a game that'll sell well to its core audience. Windy Windham oozes passion in every aspect. You can tell this was a game made by a group of people who just wanted to make it. And I think in the end, despite its shortcomings, that is something truly worth praising. Also, this character's only clothes are a hat and a conveniently sized and shaped tie. What the actual fuck? Want more videos like this one? Well, you're in luck because I happen to make those. I mean, sometimes at least. And if you press the subscribe button, there's a 5% chance that YouTube will randomly tell you when that is. So why not give it a try? I also have a Discord server where this video was suggested. You can join out in the description below for updates on videos or just to interact and chill. I'll see you there.